As therapists, we know the work doesn't end when the session does. There's scheduling, notes, billing, and insurance follow ups waiting for you. That's why we're big fans of tools that actually make the admin side easier. Simple Practice is an all in one EHR built specifically for therapists. So everything lives in one place and you can focus on your clients. Learn more at simplepractice.com/therapy reimagined.
This episode is sponsored by The Receptionist, a sign-in app company. The Receptionist for iPad is a HIPAA-ready digital check-in system that allows you to easily check in clients and take your time back. Learn more by visiting thereceptionist.com/MTSG and get your first month free.
You're listening to the Modern Therapist Survival Guide, where therapists live, breathe, and practice as human beings. To support you as a whole person and a therapist, here are your hosts, Curt and Katie Vernoy.
Welcome back, Modern Therapists. This is a Modern Therapist Survival Guide. I'm Curt with Katie Vernoy, and this is the podcast for therapists about the things that go on in our practices, the things that go on in our world. And let's be honest, most of us went to grad school because we want to deep dive into people's lives, solve generational trauma, maybe if we're lucky, master the art of meaningful silence. But very few of us sat in lectures thinking, I can't wait to design high-end conversion automation intake workflows. And we are here today with Michael Ashford. He's the Senior Director of Marketing at Sign-In Solutions to talk more on the customer service end of our field, a field that isn't necessarily something that got taught a lot in grad school. So we are very happy to have you here with us today. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing some of your expertise.
Katie, Curt, thanks so much for having me. I look forward to the conversation.
I'm looking forward to this conversation as well. But before we get started, I'm going to ask you the question we ask all of our guests, which is, who are you and what are you putting out into the world?
Love this question, and I love the way that you framed it, because I think it's important that I just don't tell you what I do. Like you said, Curt, I'm the Senior Director of Marketing at a software company. But if you take a step back and get to who I am, I believe that most of us were never taught how to communicate well. Now, I'm speaking to a group of therapists here who know a lot about communication and interpersonal communication, but as a someone who has a master's in communication, someone who has delivered TEDx talks, someone who has been a marketer for 15 plus years now, someone who was a former journalist. I love telling stories. I love people's stories, and I love getting into how we can overcome conflict by better understanding each other through the words that we use, through understanding the emotions behind the words that we use. All of that flows into communication. And the fact that I think our formal education failed us when it came to how do we communicate well with others, especially when conflict exists. Now, I know that's not what we're talking about here today, but that's whether it is in marketing, whether it is as a journalist, whether it is as a TEDx speaker, all of those things come down to that fact. I love communication and I love telling people stories.
We're talking about customer service for a lot of therapists when they're first stepping into this space. It might feel a bit cold. It might feel just out of their element, like wearing clothes that are 2 sizes too small. And so there's a lot of just areas that people can make mistakes, and maybe taking some of the collective wisdom out of things that you've learned before. What do some therapists typically get wrong in this space? And if we can save our audience some opportunities to not make some of those same mistakes.
The thing that immediately comes to mind there, Curt, is believing that customer service or customer experience only happens when you are interacting directly one-to-one with that customer or with that patient. When we think about the entirety of the customer service experience, and something that we've trademarked here at the Receptionist to now Sign-In Solutions, or part of the Sign-In Solutions family, is this concept of radical support. What does it mean to go above and beyond just that one-to-one interaction with someone when they have a specific challenge or a specific need, and think about the entirety of their interaction with us from the moment they become aware of us to the moment when they walk out of our building and anticipate the next time they will engage and interact with us. As it relates to your audience and the audience listening here, I think of it like one of our clients who is a therapist for folks who struggle with eating disorders in particular. And so when you think about the type of person that is going to walk into that space and the challenges that they're dealing with, the things that are going through their head and what they come into the therapy space to hopefully deal with and overcome, well, that particular client of ours thought about the waiting room and making sure that there is size inclusive furniture, making sure that there is I know a lot of therapists talk about making sure you have white noise, of course, so you don't hear what's going on. That's a privacy thing, but just making sure that what you're offering by way of snacks or the expectations for a client when they enter into your space, that it has all of those elements in mind about what will their experience be, and you might not even be in the room in the first place.
It seems like some of these things come later on. A lot of clinicians, they start their practices and they are basically flying by the seat of their pants. And so the thought that you're describing here is it's pretty extensive. It's looking at who am I seeing? How can I best support them from the moment they walk into my physical office? And I think that's kind of what we're talking about today is those that have physical offices that they're having come in. And when I think about that, each niche, each specialization is going to have some different things to consider. And maybe it would be helpful for us in this conversation to focus in on the stuff that's a little bit more universal and and maybe describe that as best we can. Because I think I talk to a lot of folks who start their private practice and every decision feels overwhelming. It feels very daunting. Which EHR should I use? Which thing should I use? How should I set this up? And so my goal in our conversation is to be able to simplify this for folks because I think it's just daunting, all these decisions that they can make. So, what are some of the choices that you're seeing as far as the customer service angle that folks need to be aware of? Can we simplify it for them?
I think in that question, Katie, if I heard you right, one of the most important things that I think about, certainly as a marketer, is getting a really strong understanding of who you want to serve. And I also understand when you're just getting started, the pull, the draw is to say, well, I serve anybody and everybody because it's just about your time is your money. And so it's just about having a client across from you, whether it's digital or in person, which I know we're kind of talking about. But there is often a pull, especially with people just starting out in a new business venture, that I want to be for everybody because I want to cast as wide an as possible because I need money coming in the bank. Like I
Sure.
need it coming in the door. But we're taught in marketing, we're taught in so many different ways and fashions that if you're thinking about starting a business, every business owner will tell you that their business grew the fastest and it grew the most when they could speak to a specific audience with a specific problem or pain set. And it doesn't mean that you can only focus on that narrow area. It doesn't mean that you can only say, I'm only going to treat people or see people with this type of trauma. But having an idea of who your best client is and speaking directly to them in your marketing when they walk in the door and the type of experience that they might have, or how you position yourself in your Psychology Today profile, on your website, what problems are you speaking to? Who's the audience? That will help grow because when somebody lands and begins to interact with you, when somebody lands on your website or your profile, you want them to say, "Oh, they're for me. I see myself sitting across from them now," and them knowing and understanding my problems or the things that I'm dealing with, the challenges that I face. I want to work with that person. So if we're talking about real high level applicability to everyone, it's niching. It's understanding who your best fit audience is.
As a therapist, your work extends far beyond the therapy hour. There's the administrative load, scheduling, documentation, billing, insurance, follow ups, all of the essential tasks that happen before and after the clinical work you're truly passionate about. We know how quickly that admin work can pile up. Simple Practice is an all-in-one electronic health record designed specifically for therapists. With HIPAA-compliant tools and high-trust certification, it helps you avoid juggling multiple systems or cutting corners just to keep your practice running smoothly. Everything you need lives in one place: scheduling, notes, billing, insurance, secure client communication, and automated appointment reminders.
And if you're starting or scaling your practice, Simple Practice also offers credentialing services to simplify the insurance enrollment process, which can otherwise be a huge hurdle. We appreciate having systems that are built specifically for therapists, not retrofitted from somewhere else. Ready to simplify your practice? Start with a 7-day free trial and get 50% off your first 4 months at simplepractice.com/therapy reimagined. That's simplepractice.com/therapy reimagined. How does that translate from the beginning of somebody's experience with a therapist through not only the marketing materials that they meet, but into the clinical process?
Well, you want it to all be seamless, I would imagine. You would want the profile or the expectation or the marketing that you put out there, whether it's on your social media or any other avenues we mentioned today, to then match the experience when you're first invited into that onboarding call, or when you're first invited into the EHR system and what paperwork do I fill out. I wanted to match the experience that I expect when I made the decision to reach out to this person. So, was that easy? Great. Did that speak to me? Absolutely. Now, the onboarding or the intake call or the intake paperwork, does that match my same experience and my same expectations? Then, when I actually get into session, does that match what I signed up for, what I'm coming into? Does the office environment or the practice environment, if we're talking about an in-person physical space, does it match again the privacy that I expect? Does it match the feel that I expect from this person? And then finally, everything post after that. How am I billed? How am I followed up with? How do I schedule my next appointment? Customer support and experience, the customer support experience is just that. What is my experience through the entirety of the process? And does it meet my expectations that formed in that very beginning?
What are the risks if it does not meet those expectations?
I think at best it creates some disappointment and some initial hurdles to overcome. I'll give you an example from me and my own personal experience. I've walked into several different therapist office as a patient over the last 5 years, and in every single one of those offices, that was not the first time I was meeting my therapist. Was the day of my first appointment. I had met them before digitally at that point. But then you walk in that first day, you're a little bit on edge. You're a little bit nervous. You're thinking about, what am I even going to talk about? How many times has somebody sat down and said, "Oh, I'm having a great week. I don't even know what I'm going to talk about in this session." And then by the end, if it's me, I'm in tears by the end of the session. But I walk into those spaces, I sit down, there's no one there. There's not even a front desk to speak of, let alone somebody there to tell me, "Hey, here's where the restroom is if you need to use it before your session. Here's where you check in to let your therapist know that you've arrived. Here's where the snacks and drinks and waters are," what have you. And so what has happened to me several times is I've sat down, looking around. The question that goes through my head is, do they even know I'm here? And so eventually they come out, they poke the head around the corner. One of my therapists in my first session said, "Oh, Michael, I didn't even hear you come in." And again, it's just this hurdle that you have to go over mentally in that client or patient's head of, I've got so many other things that I'm thinking about ramping up into this engagement. The last thing I want to be thinking about is, does anybody know I'm here? Does that make sense?
It does.
I have to imagine that this also extends to a lot of the intake paperwork and emails that go back and forth. And for therapists who haven't been on the client end of that, this doesn't just exist in that physical waiting room sort of space. This also exists in a lot of the contact points that are consultations what should we keep in mind for clients who are sitting in that virtual waiting room?
Uh, that's a great question, and I don't know that I have a wonderful answer to that. From a virtual or digital standpoint, because there's only so much that can be done, right? Most of us are using Zoom or some other digital platform to host our conversations. Maybe it's run through your EHR system for HIPAA compliance reasons. I understand that whole get up. But again, the customer service experience, even then, is how much am I making my client or patient have to think? I understand there's intake paperwork, to your point, Curt. There's intake paperwork that has to be legalese. But can I send information along with that legalese to explain, here's what it's going to say, here's what it actually means, here's how this is going to go, here's what you can expect from me. When you join, we're going to start right at this time. And I will let you know. It's all, again, I go back to setting expectations. When you join, you'll see a blank screen. I'll pop in when our session is ready to begin. In the meantime, sit back, relax. You can have your camera off if you'd like. I would prefer the camera to be on so we can interact more. It's all about expectation settings. Even more so, I guess I would say, in a digital state, because there is so much more unknown there. So I said I didn't have a great answer, but maybe I eventually got us around it. What? I don't know. You be the judge if it was great or not.
Some of the things that I'm thinking about is the just massive amounts of paperwork that we can end up giving to somebody in the first place. That there's oftentimes a lengthy informed consent, there's questionnaires, there's potentially requests for extra insurance paperwork for clinicians who are doing that can feel really overwhelming to have it happen all at once. And then there's also the specifics of the types of clients that you're working with. For example, for trauma therapists who are wanting to get an idea of what the particular pain points that a client are bringing in, but also not wanting somebody to go into a trauma response just in filling out paperwork too. So these are all
Right.
kind of extra considerations that people might want to consider as you're narrowing down that focus as well.
I'd agree. And when you think about this concept I've repeated several times, but setting expectations, it is setting expectations for yourself as well as somebody starting out. We talked a little bit about somebody starting out and creating a business. What's the expectation that you have for how you want to run your business? What's the optimal state? Understand, Katie, to your point earlier, it can all feel overwhelming at first to try and get to that optimal state. But if you can control what you can control, if you can control those interactions and say, at this point, I know I can do this. I know I can set this expectation. I know I can deliver this information in as clear and a kind of way based on, to your point, Curt, who I know I'm going to be interacting with, then we have a chance to really mold and shape the experience based on certainly how we want it as the business owner or the person running the practice or the session, and that translates to the customer or the client.
So, having sat in that client seat, it sounds like a number of different times with different therapists and
Yeah.
also, reflecting on your work in marketing. How would you design the customer service experience for solo or small group practices from the initial inquiry call through the final meeting?
Wow, goodness. How much time
J-
do we have here? uh So, the marketer in me wants to jump back to what I was talking about earlier.
Sure,
When you start your website, when you create your LLC, have in mind that best case ideal client that you wanna get into or that you wanna serve. Again, we don't have to cast a wide net, and it doesn't also mean by narrowing that niche or that focus that you have to say no to anybody who falls outside of it. It's
sure.
just you want when somebody lands on your information, whether it's your social profile, your Psychology Today profile, your website, you want them to see themselves in your messaging. So the marketer in me goes to you begin your experience, the design of this customer experience in your messaging and in your niche, who you're serving, and what you're trying to help them with, the problems that they're. So it's not One of the things that I would say is, that we can get real tactical here, by the way. On your H1 header on your website, and if you don't know what that is, it's just the big font that shows up first when the website loads. Rather than saying your name and all of your credentials, say something to the effect of what problem you solve. So riffing this off the top of my head, helping expecting mothers deal with the reality of losing their identity that they once held. If that's your niche, expecting mothers or postpartum mothers, how do we make sure we understand the problem, and how does our website speak directly to that? So, setting that aside on the marketing side,
Sure.
then weaving that information into your intake forms, setting expectations of what specifically will happen when somebody fills out a form on your website for an inquiry. I see all the time that the expectation that is set is someone will be with you as soon as possible. Well, could you be more specific in that to help set expectations? Someone or I or my administrative assistant will follow up with you within 2 business days. Now I know I can expect a phone call or an email within 2 business days. That makes sense to me. And it answers a question in my mind when that phone call is going to happen or when that email is going to get sent, right? From there, it's what do we say on that call to explore that patient, what they're needing help with, what they want to discover within themselves, making sure who's ever doing the intake, whether it's the therapist or somebody who's positioned or licensed to do intake calls, making sure that they understand your expectations as the practice owner, whether if it's a virtual assistant, same thing, setting expectations. Here's how we ask questions. Here's the types of questions we don't ask. And then the paperwork. Curt, you mentioned it. Does it align with everything up to that point, to the point where they then walk into the office that, again, I'm checking in, somebody knows that I'm there. I'm not having all these thoughts of what's going to happen next. Even sending an email the day of or the day before the appointment saying, when you walk into the office, here's what you can expect. Check in on this iPad over here, have a seat over here. Bathrooms are down the hall to the left. And there's a refrigerator stocked with sodas and water and some snacks. And, again, be cognizant of, do you want to have peanuts as part of that snack bag if you're a food therapist? Right? Like all these things. I know it's overwhelming, everything that I've talked about, to your point, Katie, but
Yeah.
it is making sure every point along the way, what is the message that I want to send here?
Your time is valuable. Whether you're hyper-focused on admin tasks like billing or simply trying to make a cup of coffee between appointments, constant interruptions can derail your entire day.
This episode is sponsored by The Receptionist, a sign-in app company. The Receptionist for iPad is a HIPAA-ready digital check-in system that eliminates the need to walk back and forth from your office to the waiting room to see if your next appointment has arrived. Clients and patients can securely check in for their appointments, and you'll be immediately notified by text, email, or your preferred channel. Break free from interruptions and make the most of your time.
Start a 14-day free trial of The Receptionist for iPad by going to thereceptionist.com/MTSG. Make sure to start your trial with that link, and you'll also get your first month free if you decide to sign up.
It seems to me that therapists can get caught in all the tiny little decisions, or they can default to this is what everybody does. And so I like that you're talking about food allergies around, making sure that you have inclusive furniture, that you've really laid out what's going on. And I think the piece that most folks don't think about is that initial walking into the waiting area and having no idea if I'm in the right place. Do they know I'm here? What's going to happen? How long do I wait? Because I think especially therapy newbies may not know whether or not they're going to have to wait. Usually you go to a doctor's office, you wait 15, 20, 30 minutes, an hour. And with therapy, most of the time, your session should start right on time or very close to it. And so I think many of us, I think, forget how important it is to lay out those expectations and make it clear and even just be so thoughtful with the process. So I'm really appreciating this conversation.
Yeah, and it's another experience I had was I was walking into a therapy office. It was a group practice, and I was walking in for the first time. I was still the only person in the waiting room, the waiting area, and the rest of the offices, I could look around the corner and there was just this long, long hallway with all these offices, and I had no idea which one was my therapist, and I also didn't know I hadn't seen my therapist up to that point. I had spoken with him on the phone, but I hadn't seen him. He was a recommendation. I had just called his office, did an intake, then spoken with him, and then we set that initial appointment once we agreed to work together. So I didn't even know what my therapist looked like. And so it's one of those things where I'm like, do I start going down like cuz I didn't this was actually the first time I went to therapy. I didn't know yeah, you're probably not supposed to like go knocking on the other therapist's door. They're probably in session, but I didn't know. So, it's one of in my head, I'm wondering, what do I do? Do I just sit here and wait for somebody to come get me? Am I supposed to know and look for the nameplate on the door and knock on that door? It's just one of these we often refer to it as person nearest the door. If and of course, inevitably, somebody will come out thinking it's their patient and it's me. I'm sitting there and they're like, "Oh, I thought you were my patient. Sorry. Somebody will be right with you." So inevitably I'll start to look around the corner. Do they know that I'm here? And if I see somebody, hey, do you know so and so? I'm here to meet with so and so. It's just a decision point that does not need to happen, or we can create processes around alleviating that decision point for our clients.
It's so funny because I just moved offices and I'm very good at saying this is how you get to the office, and my office is a little confusing to get to. So I have like turn by turn directions that I've written out. And I, created a little waiting area. So I say, this is where it is, and you're going to sit there and I'll come get you. And I have several therapists on my caseload. And so they know the drill, right? And even therapists need a little bit more guidance when something isn't quite as expected. If it doesn't look exactly the same as a doctor's office with a person at the front taking your insurance card and doing all that stuff. And so I think this is really important for people to think about.
I also think it's important for the therapist and protecting their time, protecting
Sure.
and helping them set expectations for themselves. So I know a lot of therapists typically the session will run for 50 minutes or 55 minutes and they schedule it for an hour because they need that 5 to 10-minute buffer to, I don't know, use the restroom or go get a drink of water, refill their water bottle or finish up notes from that client. But in the meantime, a lot of people, if you're like me, you like to show up 5 to 10 minutes early to an appointment just on the off chance, hey, you might get called in early or, I'm from the Midwest. To be early is to be on time
Sure.
in the Midwest. So I'm gonna be there no matter what, 5 to 10 minutes early, even if I know the session's starting right at the hour. But again, it's how what expectation do I wanna set for myself in being able to grab a bite to eat in between sessions, to be able to, again, use the restroom, grab a drink of water, touch base with my clinical supervisor and say, "Hey, I really need to talk to you about this patient that I just saw. Remind me at the end of the day, can we just have a few minutes?" Like those in the hall passing moments if you're in a group practice, for example, or answer a text message from your kid that is like, "Hey, can I come home early from school today?" And you're like, "No, you can't." So it's as much setting the expectation for the patient in the waiting room as it is the patient or the therapist who is a human being too and has things to do in between those sessions.
A lot of what you're talking about is as far as the website, as far as some of the paperwork sorts of things, makes a lot of sense for the solo practitioner or a fairly defined small group practice. For those practices where they might be seeing a wider variety of clients, because it is a group practice where somebody's the child therapist and somebody's the family therapist,
Yeah.
how does your advice change?
Great question, Curt. I would say the advice doesn't change much. Obviously, it needs to be a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for? It needs to be a little bit like dispersed in terms of like making sure that it does fit or fit all those characteristics or those requirements of the clients that you're going to have in that space. It is a little bit harder to do when you're in a larger group practice. I know of one of our customers that is exactly as you describe, and their waiting area is a little bit more doctor's officey, where you might have a private practice doctor, where it is got the kids area over to the side, but it also has, a room if for neurodivergent folks who don't want to hear the sound machine before they start to walk into the building, or they have a box of fidgets there, perhaps. It's just making sure that there is something for everyone, that in the experience they see themselves in something. If I'm the marketer and I go back to the website experience, yeah, we're going to be talking in a little bit more generalized terms. That was the word I was looking for, generalized. If we're talking a little bit more generalized terms on the website as it pulls up, we want to make sure that across the top of the page or further down the page, we have specific language for all the areas that you do specialize in. So in that instance, we do have child therapists, we do have trauma therapists, we do have therapists who specialize in EMDR. We do have all these things, right? Like, you wanna speak to the audience that's coming to the site. If it's more generalized, the whole goal then would be to funnel them into a more specific experience to the point where they are sitting down across from the therapist themselves that they've chosen to work with.
You've described a lot of different points at which making a decision to optimize customer service makes a lot of sense. And it goes into the whole experience, the kind of the client onboarding experience through getting into the room. Is there a point where good customer service actually interferes with clinical work, or is there a need to balance being service oriented with maintaining firm therapeutic boundaries?
You said it right there, boundaries. As I mentioned when we first started talking, so much of our perception of customer service is that one-to-one interaction with the person that we're helping. And when our boundaries, our professional and personal boundaries start to get crossed in the name of customer service, that's where I start to raise the red flag.
Okay.
When customer service means I'm taking an intake call after hours because for any number of reasons, I don't know one off the top of my head, but it's eating into my it's eating into my family time. You've got to weigh the balance of, again, that pull for, hey, every lead is a potential client. That means, a butt in the seat, so to speak. That means I'm getting paid. I understand that we're in a time for pay industry or business here. I can understand the pull to want to deviate towards, yeah, I'll take that after hours intake call. I'll schedule that session that eats a little bit into my commute time, so I get home a little bit later than normal, so it eats into my family time or my time to sit down to dinner with my family. When we cross personal boundaries, and if you do all of your intake for whatever reason, just an example, if you do all of your intake forms via email, but a client wants to get on a phone call and walk through all of them, that's a personal choice that you have to make, a business choice that you have to make. But is there a boundary that the line is starting to gray there? Good customer service does not have to mean giving the customer everything that they want. I think the customer is always right is an outdated model. And we have to be able to, again, set the expectations for ourselves about what we will and will not tolerate, where our boundary lines are. And gosh, is a client or is the need to create an experience for this customer stepping on that line or stepping over it entirely?
A lot of the boundary friction points that I see clinicians talking about is when they are actually enforcing said boundaries. and things such as enforcing late cancellation fees, bringing up rate increases. Any suggestions on how to minimize the amount of conflict that goes around those things?
Oh, well, now we're starting to get into some sales psychology here. But oftentimes, in my experience, in working with and doing this myself for many years, we build up the ask in our head. The story we tell ourselves in our head becomes so much greater than what the reality is. So the rate increase, for example, we so often go into that conversation believing that we have to explain and justify the rate increase, when in actuality, the rate increase is what it is. You can simply have the conversation with your client at the end of a session or whenever you deem appropriate. I want you to know and give you a heads up that in 2 months, I have to increase my rate to this. My hourly rate is increasing by $10 an hour to this. I want to let you know ahead of time in case there's anything you need to do to plan. If there's any issues, let me know and let's talk about it. Stop talking after that. There's no need to explain, well, because my rent's going up, or well, the price of gas, it's getting out of hand. Like, we don't need to explain what is best for our business and the choices that we made based on that. Now, the expectation you need to set for yourself as the therapist or as the business owner has to be, if a client pushes back on that, I've been working with you for 2 years and I've never missed a session. I don't know that I can afford that. You need to have the conversation with yourself and say, am I willing to make an exception for this person? That's an expectation setting for you. And if somebody pushes back on it, what are you going to say? Same thing with the other situation that you brought up, Curt. What was the other scenario that you brought up?
Raising fees, late cancellation.
Cancellations. Yes. Clearly stating that in your forms, on your website, in your forms, even having the intake person walk through that as part of the process so that there is no denying that they do not know that there is a cancellation fee, and simply enforcing that. Okay, I understand that, not asking to collect the cancellation fee, but stating that you will. So, how it would sound like, I need to cancel my session. Okay, understand. We're actually, based on the documentation or based on the agreement that you signed when you first came on as a client, our cancellation policy is this. I'll be collecting the fee for this session at this time. Now, again, an expectation that you have to set with yourself is, are there points where I'm willing to have some flexibility and wiggle room on that? Is a child's sickness a reason to cancel, to not collect on a cancellation fee? Is any number of these scenarios. But again, the more you communicate that to your customers, to your clients, your patients, the better off you're going to be in simply stating what the policy is that they were already made aware of. Oftentimes, the answer you get back is, yeah, I know, I understand. But if you do get pushback, you always have a point in the or a line in the sand that you have drawn with them that says, this is what it is and this is what you agreed to. And hold firm to that. That's part of being a business owner. It is part of the job.
I think the big takeaway I have for today is clarity and expectations, and making sure that when you set boundaries that it's based in a place of, I had put forward the expectations, this is where this doesn't meet this is how I'm going to respond. I really like that. Before we run out of time though, I do want to talk a little bit about the receptionist.
I'm happy to talk about the receptionist. So we're a wonderful, we're excited to be a partner of this show and this podcast, but we are a visitor management, visitor check-in system. As it relates to this space, we're a patient check-in system. So if in creating that optimal experience, that optimal customer support experience for your patients and clients walking into a physical office, no longer having to sit there waiting if anybody knows that they're there, then it's iPad based. They walk up to the tablet, they check in. We do have a HIPAA-ready environment available if that is of a concern, but so that patient information is protected and secure. But the patient checks in on an iPad, they're there, they've checked in. The system now knows and lets them know through expectation setting that they've been recorded. And the therapist gets either an email, a text message, a Slack, or a Teams notification, or any other type of notification that, hey, your next appointment's arrived. And that might be, if you're the Midwesterner like I am, I might be there 15 minutes early because it was on my way home from work and traffic wasn't as bad. Now, in the middle of your session, as you're trying to wrap up the good part of the session, which is always the last 10 minutes, right? You don't have to worry about the patient sitting out in the lobby that doesn't know that anybody's there. They know that somebody knows that they're there. You know that they're there. And now you can focus on wrapping up that session. That's the peace of mind, hopefully, that our system allows you. Now, I do want to say, as I mentioned earlier, I'm the Senior Director of Marketing at Sign-In Solutions. Sign-In Solutions acquired the Receptionist in early January of this year, 2026. So the Receptionist for iPad is now Sign-In app, and we'll be making those changes and modifications over the coming months. But I want to make that clear as well. It's now Sign-In app.
And where can people find out more about Sign-In app and the Receptionist?
If you go to thereceptionist.com, you can find all the information there, and that will direct people to the appropriate resources. But you can also go directly to thereceptionist.com/MTSG, I believe. We'll make sure and put that in the show notes, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we will.
To sign up for a free trial, test the system out yourself. And if you do end up signing, there's a little bit of a discount for you there as well.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
And you can find that show note over at mtsgpodcast.com and follow us on our social media, join our Facebook group, the Modern Therapist Group, to continue on with this and other conversations. And until next time, I'm Curt Whithelm with Katie Vernoy and Michael Ashford.
If you're looking to streamline your practice, we recommend checking out Simple Practice. Start your 7-day free trial and get 50% off your first 4 months at simplepractice.com/therapy reimagined. That's simplepractice.com/therapy reimagined.
With the Receptionist for iPad, there's no more walking back and forth to check the waiting room for your next appointment. Receive an instant notification that your next client has arrived, securely and privately. Visit thereceptionist.com/MTSG and get your first month free.
Thank you for listening to the Modern Therapist Survival Guide. Learn more about who we are and what we do at mtsgpodcast.com. You can also join us on Facebook and Twitter. And please don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of our episodes.